The crack of bone against pavement was sickeningly sharp, cutting through the misty Oakland drizzle. Imani Wallace's heart hammered against her ribs, a trapped bird in a cage of fear. "Just take it," the old man gasped, his voice a ragged whisper. The tallest of the three, the one they called Shadow, just laughed. He kicked the man's leather briefcase away and zeroed in on his wrist. "The watch, old man. Now." Imani was hidden, her back pressed to the cold brick of the corner bodega, but she saw it all. She saw the desperation. She saw the cruelty. And then she saw the car slow down, its window rolling down just an inch. Sarah Jenkins, from her AP History class, her eyes wide, staring right at them. The sky over East Oakland was the color of a fresh bruise, a dull, purplish gray that promised more rain than it delivered. Imani Wallace pulled the thin hood of her jacket tighter, the damp chill seeping into her bones. It was a weariness that went deeper than the weather. It was the exhaustion of her 4 a.m. start, stocking shelves at the Safeway before her classes at Oakland High, and the long, quiet hours of her afternoon shift at the public library. Now, walking the 12 blocks home, her mind wasn't on the wet pavement or the distant wail of sirens. It was on the application sitting on her desk, the one printed on heavy cream-colored cardstock. The Bay Area Civic Leadership Scholarship. It was her only way out. A full ride to UC Berkeley, a stipend, and, most importantly, mentorship from the kinds of people who never, ever walked down streets like this one. She clutched the strap of her backpack, the essays she'd rewritten for the 10th time tucked safely inside. What does civic leadership mean to you? To her, it meant not becoming a statistic. It meant getting her mother out of her second job cleaning offices downtown. It meant finding a way to reach her 14-year-old brother, Leo, before the magnetic pull of the corner boys, the ones who promised quick money and a false sense of family, claimed him for good. She was so lost in thought, rehearsing her answers for a potential interview, that she almost missed it. It happened in the fractured quiet of a side street, just 3 blocks from her apartment. The sounds were wrong, muffled and sharp all at once. A scuffle, a grunt of effort, and a high, reedy voice pleading, "No, please!" Imani's body froze before her mind caught up. Her first instinct, born of a lifetime of navigating these streets, was to reverse. To turn around, walk briskly, and disappear. Don't see it. Don't be a witness. Don't get involved. Her mother's voice was a permanent echo in her head. "You ain't invisible, Imani, but you gotta learn to be small." But she didn't turn. She crept forward, her sneakers silent, and peered around the graffitied edge of the corner bodega. 3 of them. Local kids. She recognized the tallest, the one they called Shadow. He was in Leo's grade, but already had the dead-eyed swagger of a man twice his age. They had an old man cornered against the chain-link fence of a vacant lot. He was white, dressed in a dark wool coat and a suit that cost more than her family's rent. He looked utterly out of place, a creature from a different ecosystem. "Just take it," the old man gasped, trying to shove his wallet at them. Shadow laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He wasn't interested in the wallet. He kicked the man's expensive leather briefcase, sending it skidding across the wet concrete. "The watch, old man. Now." He grabbed the man's arm. The other 2, younger and more nervous, fanned out, their eyes darting around. The old man twisted, a surprising show of resistance. "No, it was my wife's." Shadow's patience snapped. He shoved the man hard. The man stumbled, his balance gone. He fell backward, and the sound of his head hitting the pavement was sharp and sickening. Crack! Imani's breath hitched. A gasp escaped her. Shadow's head snapped in her direction, his eyes, flat and cold, locked onto hers. "Mind your business, Mani," he hissed. The use of her name, the casual threat, sent a spike of pure ice through her veins. He knew her. He knew where she lived. He knew Leo. "Go!" her mind screamed. "Run!" But the old man, he wasn't moving. He was just lying there, a thin trickle of blood starting to mat his gray hair. And then another element. Headlights. A sleek, black Tesla slowed as it approached the intersection. The window hummed down an inch. Imani saw the driver clearly. Sarah Jenkins, her polished, perfect rival for the scholarship, the daughter of a high-powered attorney. Sarah's perfectly made-up eyes went wide, taking in the scene. Shadow and his crew, the old man on the ground, and Imani standing just yards away, frozen. Sarah didn't scream. She didn't honk. Her eyes met Imani's for one long, terrible second. Then her window hummed up, and the Tesla accelerated, disappearing around the corner. The car's arrival had spooked the other two boys. "Come on, Shadow, let's dip." Shadow gave Imani one last venomous look. He snatched the fallen briefcase, and the three of them vanished into the labyrinth of alleys behind the lot. Silence descended, heavy and absolute, broken only by the old man's pained groan. Imani was shaking so hard she could barely stand. She saw me. Sarah saw me. And she left. "Help. Me." The voice was a thread. Imani forced her legs to move. She ran to him, her fear warring with a sudden, overwhelming surge of adrenaline. "Sir? Sir, can you hear me?" She knelt, her knees soaking in the gritty puddle. The cut on his head was deep. "Oh, God. Okay. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers numb. She dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency?" "I'm at the corner of 34th and Chestnut," Imani said, her voice trembling. "A man's been attacked. He's bleeding from his head. He's old. I need an ambulance. Now." "Are the attackers still there?" "No, they ran." "Okay, ma'am. Help is on the way. Are you safe?" Imani looked at the man. His eyes fluttered open, hazy and unfocused. They were a sharp, piercing blue. My papers," he mumbled. "It's okay. They're gone. An ambulance is coming," Imani said. She ripped off her own scarf, a cheap, pilled acrylic thing her mom had given her for Christmas, and folded it, pressing it gently against the wound. "Just stay with me. You have to stay awake," he grunted, his hand weakly trying to push her away. Who are you?" "My name is Imani. Imani Wallace. I live around here." His eyes sharpened for a brief second, a flicker of keen intelligence behind the pain. "Wallace, you're from here." It wasn't a question, it was a statement, weighted with, what, disappointment? "Yes, sir. Just hold on." She could hear the sirens now, growing closer. The man's eyes rolled back. No, stay with me," she pleaded, tapping his cheek. "What's your name? Tell me your name." He muttered something, but his eyes closed. He was unconscious. The ambulance and a police cruiser screeched to a halt at the same time. Paramedics spilled out, pushing Imani aside with a practiced, impersonal efficiency. "Female, approx 17, witness. Sir, can you hear me? GCS of 9, obvious head trauma." A cop, his face weary and skeptical, turned to Imani. She was standing there, her hands covered in the old man's blood. "You see what happened?" he asked, his pen already poised over his notepad. "Yes, 3 guys. They mugged him. They hit him. He fell." "You know him?" Imani's throat closed. This was the moment she either became a snitch and put her family in Shadow's crosshairs, or she lied. I didn't see their faces clearly," she lied. "It happened so fast. They ran that way." She pointed down the alley. The cop sighed, not believing her for a second. "And you? You just stumbled on this?" "I was walking home. I yelled at them. I think I scared them off. Then I called 911. Uh-huh. Name? Imani Wallace. Address? She gave it to him, her stomach churning. She watched as they loaded the old man onto a gurney. His expensive wool coat was ruined, stained dark. As they lifted him, something fell from his pocket. A small gold-plated business card holder. The cop picked it up, glanced at it, and his entire demeanor changed. His back straightened. He looked at the old man with new, sudden respect. "Get me a watch commander now," he barked into his radio. "The Vic is Judge Arthur Pendleton." The name meant nothing to Imani. She just wanted to go home. Can I go?" she asked. The cop gave her a long, hard look. "Stay out of trouble, kid, and don't leave town. We'll be in touch." Imani turned and walked away, her scarf, her blood-soaked cast-off scarf, forgotten on the pavement next to the dark, spreading pool of blood. She didn't run until she was 2 blocks away, and when she did, she wasn't just running from the sirens. She was running from the cold, flat stare of Shadow and the assessing, judging eyes of Sarah Jenkins. The apartment was quiet, smelling of bleach and the faint, sweet scent of the corn tortillas her mother, Elena, had left warming in the oven. Elena was already gone, off to her second job cleaning the towering glass and steel offices in downtown San Francisco. A note on the fridge, held by a chipped I Hearts Oakland magnet, read, "Leo at practice. Be safe. Mommy." Imani's hands were still shaking. She stood at the kitchen sink for 10 minutes, scrubbing her hands under scalding water, long after the old man's blood was gone. But she could still feel its sticky warmth, still see the piercing, hazy blue of his eyes. Judge Arthur Pendleton. The name echoed. It sounded important. It sounded like trouble. Her brother, Leo, burst in an hour later, all lanky limbs and restless energy, his basketball bouncing on the linoleum. "What's up, Monty? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just tired," she said, managing a weak smile. "How was practice?" "Straight. Coach says I might start Friday." He dumped his sweaty bag by the door and grabbed a tortilla, rolling it up. He paused, his expression turning sly. "Yo, I heard some noise down on 34th. Sounded like cops. You see anything?" Imani's blood ran cold. "No, nothing. I had my headphones in." Leo looked at her, his dark eyes too knowing for a 14-year-old. "Good, that's good. Best to keep your head down. Shadow's crew was hanging round there. They ain't playing." He said it with a note of, was that admiration? Imani's stomach twisted. "Leo, stay away from them, please. They're not your friends." "They ain't my enemies neither," he retorted, his voice hardening. "They're just here, same as us." He disappeared into their shared room, and the click of his video game console starting up was a punctuation mark on a conversation she was losing. The next day at school, the air was thick with it. The attack on a prominent city official in East Oakland was the lead story on the local news. Oakland High, a sprawling campus that was a microcosm of the city's stark divides, was buzzing. The kids from the hills, like Sarah Jenkins, were talking about it in hushed, horrified tones. The kids from the flats, like Imani, were silent, wearing the familiar mask of studied indifference. Imani tried to focus. She had AP Government, then Calculus. But her mind kept replaying the scene. The crack of his head, Sarah's face in the car window. In the library, during her free period, she went to the computer. She typed Judge Arthur Pendleton. Her heart stopped. He wasn't just a judge. He was the Judge Pendleton, a federal judge at the Alameda County Courthouse, appointed by the president. A legal legend known as the Iron Gavel, famous for his tough-on-crime sentences and his scathing, brilliant opinions. And then she saw it. An article from the San Francisco Chronicle dated 3 weeks prior. Bay Area Civic Leadership Scholarship announces new chairman. There was a photo. A smiling, confident Arthur Pendleton, shaking hands with the dean of UC Berkeley, the man she had saved, the man whose blood had soaked her scarf. He was the one. He was the head of the scholarship committee. He held her entire future in his hands. A wild, hysterical laugh bubbled in her throat. Was this good? It had to be good. She'd saved him. She'd been a civic leader. This was fate. Her elation lasted exactly 30 minutes. It ended when she walked into the counseling center to drop off her final application packet. The scholarship was due by 5:30 p.m. Ms. Evans, the school's overworked college counselor, was on the phone, her back to the door. "I understand, Mr. Jenkins," Ms. Evans was saying, her voice strained. "Yes, I know Sarah is a finalist, of course. An anonymous tip. I see. Yes, that is deeply concerning. Imani Wallace? I've known Imani for 4 years. That doesn't sound... But a witness. Yes, I will look into it." Imani froze, her hand on the doorknob. "Mr. Jenkins. Sarah. Anonymous tip." Ms. Evans hung up and turned, her eyes widening when she saw Imani. Her face, usually so warm, was a mask of professional neutrality. "Imani, I was just about to call you in." "I heard," Imani said, her voice barely a whisper. "What did he say?" Ms. Evans sighed, gesturing for Imani to sit. The small office suddenly felt like an interrogation room. "Imani, something serious has happened. You know about the attack on Judge Pendleton." "I was there," Imani said, her voice shaking. I helped him. I called 911. "I know you did. The police report confirms a call from your number." Ms. Evans looked down at her desk. "But another report was filed. An anonymous tip. This person, this witness, claims you were with the attackers, that you were a lookout." The words hit Imani like a physical blow. "What? No, that's Sarah Jenkins. She drove by. She saw. She lied." "Imani, calm down. Sarah's father is a very powerful man. He's also on the scholarship's board of trustees. He said his daughter is deeply traumatized by what she witnessed. She claims she saw you standing over the judge and that she heard one of the attackers call you by name, like an old friend." "Mind your business, Mani." Imani's world tilted. Shadow's words, meant as a threat, had been twisted by Sarah into proof of complicity. He was threatening me," Imani whispered, tears of rage and helplessness burning her eyes. "He knows my brother. Sarah, she's lying. She's lying to win." "Why would she lie, Imani?" Ms. Evans asked, but her tone was flat. She was already calculating the odds. "Sarah Jenkins, daughter of a legal powerhouse and a scholarship trustee, versus Imani Wallace from 34th and Chestnut, whose brother was already on the school's at-risk list." It was a brutal, unfair equation. "She wants the scholarship," Imani said, the simplicity of it sounding absurd. She's always hated that I'm competition." "Imani, this is bad." Ms. Evans steepled her fingers. "The school has to open an investigation, given the seriousness of the allegation and the identity of the victim. Principal Hayes has been notified. As of right now, you're suspended." "Suspended?" Imani shot to her feet. "Suspended for what? For helping someone?" "For being a person of interest in a violent felony," Ms. Evans said, her voice regaining a clinical sharpness. "I'm sorry. Until the police clear you, you're not allowed on campus." "But the scholarship, the interview, it's next week." "I don't know, Imani." Ms. Evans wouldn't meet her eyes. "Mr. Jenkins made it clear that the board would be reviewing your finalist status in light of this new information. He said Judge Pendleton is aware of the allegation." Imani felt the floor drop out from under her. the man she had saved. He didn't know her. He didn't know she was the girl with the scarf. All he had was a police report, and now a credible witness painting her as one of the monsters who had left him bleeding on the sidewalk. She had saved his life, and in doing so, had given Sarah Jenkins the very weapon she needed to destroy hers. "It's not fair," Imani whispered, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a cold, familiar dread. "No," Ms. Evans agreed softly, finally looking up. Her eyes were full of a pity that Imani hated more than the accusation itself. "It isn't. Go home, Imani. Stay by the phone. And please don't talk to anyone about this." Imani walked out of the school, the suspension slip clutched in her hand. She was no longer a finalist. She was a suspect, and the man who held her future in his hands was the same man who would, in all likelihood, be signing the warrant. Judge Arthur Pendleton winced as the morning light, pale and watery, cut through the blinds of his private hospital room at Highland Hospital. His head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, a painful reminder of its impact with the concrete. "A concussion," the doctors said. "Minor, all things considered." He felt anything but minor. He felt old, vulnerable, and, most of all, furious. His clerk, a sharp-eyed young man named Ben, was already there, holding a tablet. "Good morning, Judge. The U.S. Marshals are posted outside. Your docket has been cleared for the week." "Unnecessary," Pendleton grumbled, trying to sit up. The room swam for a moment. "It was a damn mugging, Ben, not an assassination attempt. Get me the police report." "Right here, sir." Ben tapped the screen. "Oakland PD has 2 persons of interest. The first is a local gang affiliate known as Shadow. The second is the 911 caller." Pendleton paused. "The girl. Imani Wallace, 17, a student at Oakland High. She lives 3 blocks from the scene." Pendleton's memory of the event was fractured. He remembered the arrogance of the young men, the shock of the blow, the cold, wet pavement. And then, a face. A dark-skinned girl, her eyes wide with a terror that seemed to be warring with a fierce, protective anger. He remembered a voice, high and pleading. "Stay with me. You have to stay awake." He remembered the pressure of something soft against his head. "The report says she was a witness," Pendleton said, his judicial mind kicking in, sorting facts from feelings. "It's complicated, Judge," Ben said, visibly uncomfortable. Another witness came forward, an anonymous tip, later identified as Sarah Jenkins, daughter of attorney David Jenkins, of Morrison and Forster. Pendleton's eyes narrowed. David Jenkins, a major Democratic Party donor, a man who moved in the city's highest circles, a man who also, Pendleton suddenly recalled, sat on the board of that scholarship he was overseeing. "And what?" Pendleton said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did Ms. Jenkins have to say?" "She claims she witnessed the entire event. She places Imani Wallace with the attackers. She states she was a lookout and that the group scattered when her car approached. She also claims she heard the lead attacker call Ms. Wallace by name, as a familiar." Pendleton processed this. It was a clean, damning narrative. It fit the known facts. The girl was from the neighborhood. The attackers did know her. He distinctly remembered one of them yelling, "Manny." And Ms. Wallace's story? She claims she was walking by, intervened, and called 911 after they fled. The dispatch log confirms her call. But Ms. Jenkins's story suggests the call was a cover, a way to play the hero after the fact. Pendleton was silent. He was a man who lived by evidence, and the evidence, presented this way, was stark. A privileged girl from the hills with no conceivable reason to lie, versus a girl from the flats whose complicity was, statistically, plausible. "The girl, Wallace," Pendleton said. "I remember her scarf. She used her scarf on my head. The paramedics collected it as evidence, sir. It's at the station. I see. He rubbed his temples. The girl's face flashed in his mind again, the terror in her eyes. It hadn't felt like the terror of being caught. It felt like the terror of watching a man die. There's more, Judge, Ben said, his voice grim. Imani Wallace is a finalist for the Bay Area Civic Leadership Scholarship. Pendleton's head snapped up. This time the throb of pain was secondary to a jolt of pure, cold cynicism. She's a finalist. Of course she was. This was no longer just a mugging. It was a mess. David Jenkins called the Foundation's president this morning, Ben continued. He, on behalf of his traumatized daughter, recommended Ms. Wallace be immediately disqualified. He said he would be bringing the matter up at the final interview panel. For your protection. How very thoughtful of him, Pendleton said, his voice dripping with acid. He knew men like David Jenkins, men who built empires on connections and perceived advantages, men who would crush a fly or a teenage girl to secure one more win for their offspring. Ben, Pendleton said, his judicial mask sliding firmly into place. Get me the complete unredacted files for all the scholarship finalists, essays, transcripts, recommendations, everything. And get me the police file on this Shadow. I want to know everything he's ever been accused of. And, Ms. Wallace, sir, the police are waiting for your statement to formally bring her in for questioning. Pendleton looked out the window. If he confirmed Sarah Jenkins's story, Imani Wallace's life was over. A federal charge of accessory to assault on a federal officer. She'd be tried as an adult. She'd be ruined. My memory is hazy, Pendleton said carefully. The concussion. I can't be certain. I remember a girl's voice. I remember help arriving. I cannot, at this time, provide a positive identification of anyone. Ben looked surprised. Sir? You heard me. I'm a victim, Ben, not a witness. My head was cracked. My memory is compromised. Let the police do their work, without my contamination. Yes, Judge. And Ben, get David Jenkins on the phone. Tell him I insist the final interviews proceed as scheduled. Tell him I will be there, and that I expect all finalists, including Ms. Wallace, to be present. The board can make its review in person. Sir, is that wise, given your... Do it. Ben nodded and left. Pendleton leaned back against the stiff pillows. He was a judge. He would not be led to a conclusion. He would not be manipulated by a girl from the hood who might be a brilliant sociopath, and he certainly would not be manipulated by a shark in a $1,000 suit. He would, as he always did, preside. He would create his courtroom. The scholarship interview, he decided, would be his hearing, and he would find the truth. Meanwhile, at the Wallace apartment, Imani was a ghost. Her suspension meant she was trapped. Her mother, Elena, had been stunned, then tearful, then angry. I told you, Imani! I told you to be small! Why did you stop? Why you? You think you're a hero? Look what being a hero gets us. Mommy, he was bleeding, Imani whispered, but her defense felt weak, even to her. Her phone buzzed. A formal email from the Civic Leadership Foundation. Dear Ms. Wallace, the board is aware of the serious incident involving our chairman, Judge Pendleton. We are also aware of your alleged involvement. In light of this, your status as a finalist is pending review. However, Judge Pendleton has insisted that your final interview proceed as scheduled. Please be at our San Francisco offices on Monday at 10 a.m. A final decision on your candidacy and any potential legal referrals will be made at that time. Imani read the email 3 times. It wasn't a reprieve. It was a summons. It was an invitation to her own execution. They still want me to come? She said to her mother. It's a trap, Maha, Elena said, her hands twisting in her apron. They're going to have the police there. They're going to arrest you." "Maybe," Imani said, a tiny, hard ember of defiance starting to glow in her chest. "Maybe. But that lady, Ms. Evans, she said Judge Pendleton was aware of the allegation. But this email, it says he insisted I be there. So he can point his finger at you. So he can send you to jail himself." "Or so he can hear my side," Imani said, more to herself than her mother. "She lied, Mommy. Sarah Jenkins lied. I'm not going to let her be the only one in the room." She thought of the old man's sharp blue eyes. They weren't kind. They were assessing, like her calculus teachers, when he was waiting for her to solve a problem he knew she could. "I'm going," Imani said, her voice firming. "I don't have anything to hide. I'm going to go. I'm going to tell them the truth." Elena looked at her daughter, at the sudden, fierce set of her jaw. She saw the girl she had raised, a girl who was brilliant, stubborn, and profoundly good, and she was terrified for her. "Then you will not go alone," Elena said, untying her apron. "I will call my boss. I will take the day. We will go together." Imani nodded, a single tear finally escaping. "Okay, Mommy. Okay." The offices of the Bay Area Civic Leadership Foundation were on the 40th floor of a glittering, sterile tower in San Francisco's financial district. The elevator ride was so smooth and silent, Imani felt like she was ascending to another plane of existence. Her mother sat beside her in the lobby, her hands clasped tightly around her purse, reciting the rosary under her breath. "Imani Wallace?" A receptionist with a taut, professional smile called. "The committee is ready for you." Imani stood, smoothing the front of her one good blazer, a navy blue find from a thrift store. "Mommy, you wait here. Mija, be strong. Tell the truth. God is with you." Imani nodded, her heart feeling like a cold stone in her chest. She walked down a long, carpeted hallway and was shown into a cavernous boardroom. A massive, polished mahogany table dominated the room, overlooking a breathtaking panoramic view of the bay. The panel was already seated. 5 of them, 2 academics from Stanford and Berkeley, a well-known philanthropist, and at the far end of the table, looking pale but impossibly imposing, sat Judge Arthur Pendleton. His eyes, no longer hazy, were as sharp and blue as she remembered. They locked onto hers, and Imani felt herself stripped bare. There was no recognition, no gratitude, just a cold, analytical stare. And then she saw the 5th person, seated to the judge's right, Mr. David Jenkins, Sarah's father. He was tan, dressed in a flawless Zegna suit, and he smiled at her, a thin reptilian smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Wallace, thank you for coming," Judge Pendleton said. His voice was a gravelly baritone that filled the room. "Please, sit." Imani took the single chair at the opposite end of the table. She felt like a defendant. "We have all read your file," the philanthropist, a woman with kind eyes, began. "Your grades are, well, astonishing. Your essay on reforming the juvenile justice system was passionate." "You write about second chances," one of the academics interjected. "What do you, personally, know about second chances?" Imani cleared her throat. I know that where I live, you rarely get a first one. A mistake, a single bad choice, follows you. It becomes a label. Gang-affiliated, at risk, suspect. A second chance means seeing past the label, seeing the person. David Jenkins leaned forward, clasping his manicured hands on the table. A very poetic sentiment. But let's talk about more recent events, shall we? Ms. Wallace, the committee is aware of a recent, violent incident. An incident involving our chairman. The air in the room became frigid. "We understand you were present," Jenkins continued, his voice slick with faux sympathy. I was, Imani said, her chin high. I was walking home. I saw Judge Pendleton being attacked. I intervened, and I called 911. That is one version of the story, Jenkins said smoothly. The board, in its due diligence, has a responsibility to examine all facts. We have another finalist who, by a terrible coincidence, was also a witness, and her version differs from yours. We've asked her to join us. A side door opened, and Sarah Jenkins walked in. She was dressed in a pale pink Chanel suit, her blonde hair perfect. She looked directly at Imani, her expression one of profound, practiced sadness. Sarah, thank you for coming, her father said. Please, tell the committee what you told the police, what you saw. Sarah took a deep, shaky breath. It was awful, she began, her voice trembling just enough. I was driving. I saw them. 3 boys. They were hurting that man, and Imani was with them. The academics gasped. Judge Pendleton remained perfectly still, his face an unreadable mask. What do you mean, with them? The philanthropist asked. She was standing watch, Sarah said, a tear rolling down her cheek. She was the lookout. I heard one of them. He yelled her name. Manny, like they were friends, like they were in it together. And then she saw my car. She saw me, and she started yelling at them, pretending to be a hero. I was so scared. I drove away, and I called my dad. That's a lie, Imani's voice cracked. She shot to her feet. She's lying. I wasn't with them. I was walking home. They threatened me. I called 911. I helped him. He was bleeding. I used my scarf. She was rambling, tears of pure, hot fury blurring her vision. She looked at the judge, pleading. I used my scarf to stop the bleeding. You have to remember. Judge Pendleton just looked at her, his expression unchanged. Sit down, Ms. Wallace, he said, his voice quiet but absolute. Imani sank back into her chair, her entire body shaking. It was over. They believed her. They believed the rich girl in the Chanel suit over the poor girl with blood on her hands. Ms. Jenkins, Pendleton said, his voice still terrifyingly calm. He turned his gaze to Sarah. You are not in a courtroom, but the integrity of this foundation and this scholarship is as sacrosanct as any legal proceeding I have ever overseen. You are aware of the penalties for perjury? Sarah visibly flinched, but her father cut in. Arthur, that is wholly inappropriate. My daughter is a victim here. She is a brave young woman telling a difficult truth. She is not on trial. We are all on trial, David, Pendleton said, his eyes not leaving Sarah's. Ms. Jenkins, I will ask you one more time, as the chair of this committee. Are you absolutely certain, beyond any shadow of a doubt, of what you claim to have seen? Sarah looked at her father. He gave her a tiny, imperceptible nod. She turned back to the judge. Yes, she said, her voice firm. I am. I saw her. I'm sorry, her. I'm sorry, Imani, but I have to tell the truth. Imani's heart shattered. The cold, calculated performance was complete. I see, Judge Pendleton said. He nodded slowly. A compelling and very detailed account. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. David Jenkins smiled, a thin, satisfied smirk. He leaned back in his chair, his victory all but sealed. The panel members were looking at Imani with a mixture of pity and disgust. A brave young woman, as you said, David, Pendleton continued, his voice taking on a new, hard edge. Whose story has one, or two, rather significant flaws. David Jenkins's smile faltered. Flaws? Arthur, what are you talking about? My daughter's testimony is a fabrication, Pendleton cut in, his voice suddenly roaring to life. the iron gavel in full effect. The room, the city, the entire Bay Area seemed to shrink under the weight of his fury. A clumsy and frankly insulting fabrication. He leaned forward, his blue eyes blazing. Let's start with the small flaws, shall we? You claim, Ms. Jenkins, that you saw Ms. Wallace pretending to help after she saw your car. But the police dispatch logs, which I reviewed this morning, show Ms. Wallace's 911 call was placed at 5:17 p.m. The anonymous tip, your anonymous tip, Mr. Jenkins, which we traced, was not placed until 5:45 p.m., 28 minutes later, after I assume you and your daughter had time to process what she had witnessed. Sarah went white. I was scared. I had to drive home. You had to drive home, yes, Pendleton agreed. Which brings us to the large flaw, the fatal flaw in your testimony. He gestured to his clerk, Ben, who was standing by the door. Ben stepped forward and handed the judge a file. You see, David, Pendleton said, his voice now dangerously soft. I was a victim, and victims, well, were not always reliable. So I asked my clerks to do what they do best, investigate. They, along with the Oakland PD, pulled the cell tower data for all parties. And your cell phone, Ms. Jenkins? He looked directly at Sarah. Pinged a tower on Moraga Avenue in the Piedmont Hills at 5:14 p.m., 3 minutes before the 911 call was even placed. You were already almost home. You drove by, yes. But you drove by before the attack. You saw an old man and 3 boys. You saw Ms. Wallace walking on the other side of the street. You saw a scene, and your ambitious mind filled in the rest. This is an outrage, David Jenkins sputtered, rising from his chair. You subpoenaed my daughter's records? That's a gross overreach of my authority? Pendleton thundered. I am a federal judge who was left bleeding in the street. You think I would not use every tool at my disposal to find the truth? You, David, used your position as a trustee of this foundation and as a partner at Morrison and Foerster. He used the full, real name of the firm like a weapon to slander a minor, to obstruct a federal investigation, to attempt to defraud this committee, all to secure a scholarship for your already vastly privileged daughter. He turned to the rest of the panel, who were watching, stunned. And how do I know, with such certainty, that Ms. Jenkins is lying, because she missed the most important detail of the entire incident? He reached under the table. He brought up a large, clear plastic evidence bag. Inside it was a cheap, pilled, navy blue acrylic scarf. It was stiff with dark, dried blood. Imani gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. I was not unconscious, Ms. Wallace, Judge Pendleton said, his voice suddenly gentle as he looked at her. Not completely. I was in and out, but I remember this. I remember this scarf. I remember a girl, a child, pressing it to my head. I remember her voice, telling me to hold on, a voice that was terrified. But not of me. She was terrified for me. He placed the bag on the table like a gavel. This, he said to the panel, is Imani Wallace's scarf. The paramedics collected it from my head. Ms. Jenkins, in your detailed, truthful account, you seem to have missed the part where your lookout performed an act of basic, profound, and heroic human decency. An act that, according to the EMTs, likely kept me from bleeding far more significantly. He stood to his full, imposing height. He looked at David Jenkins. David, you and your daughter will leave this room. Now, you are, as of this moment, removed from the Board of Trustees for attempted fraud, and you can expect a formal complaint to be filed with the California State Bar by noon tomorrow for witness tampering and malicious slander. Get out. David Jenkins was purple with rage, but he knew when he was beaten. He was a shark, but Pendleton was a leviathan. He grabbed his sobbing daughter's arm and, without a word, stormed out of the boardroom. The door slammed shut, leaving a ringing silence. Imani was trembling, silent tears of relief and shock streaming down her face. Judge Pendleton sat back down. He looked at the remaining 3 panel members. "Well," he said, his voice returning to a normal, gruff timbre. "That was unpleasant. Now, I believe we still have a scholarship to award." He looked at Imani, and for the first time, she saw something new in his sharp blue eyes. A flicker of a smile. "Ms. Wallace, your essay on juvenile justice was adequate, a little idealistic, but your actions on 34th and Chestnut, that was the finest definition of civic leadership I have ever witnessed. The committee is unanimous." Imani couldn't feel her legs. The philanthropist was smiling, her eyes bright. The academics were nodding, looking at her with a newfound, profound respect. "The Bay Area Civic Leadership Scholarship, it's yours, Ms. Wallace," the philanthropist said, her voice warm. "Full tuition to Berkeley, stipend, and, it seems, a rather powerful mentor." I... Imani tried to speak, but all that came out was a sob of pure, unadulterated relief. Thank you. "Congratulations, young lady," one of the professors said. "You've more than earned it." The panel members came around the table to shake her hand. After they had filed out, promising to see her at the awards luncheon, only Imani and Judge Pendleton remained. Ben, his clerk, was discreetly gathering the files. The massive room was quiet. Imani had finally stopped crying, but she was still shaking. "Pull yourself together, Ms. Wallace," Pendleton said, though his voice lacked its previous bite. "There's work to do, sir. You're a hero, fine. You're a scholarship winner, splendid. But you're still wrong about a few things." Imani blinked, confused. What am I wrong about, sir?" "Your essay," he said, tapping the file in front of him. "It's all about second chances. A very popular notion. But you're missing the point." I don't understand." He leaned forward. "I was on that street, Miss Wallace, for a reason. I was not lost. I was there to visit the family of a man named Marcus Cole. A man I sentenced to 35 years in prison, 15 years ago. He was the kingpin of that neighborhood. He destroyed lives. I have never for 1 second regretted that sentence." He paused, his gaze distant. "The young man they call Shadow, the one who led the attack on me, is Marcus Cole's son." Imani gasped. I didn't know." "He is trapped," Pendleton said, his voice flat. "Trapped in a cycle of violence and retribution his father built. He saw me, a symbol of the system that took his father, and he reacted. Predictably. Violently. He deserves a second chance," Imani whispered. "Does he?" Pendleton's eyes bored into hers. "What about your second chance? What about your brother's?" "My attacker, Shadow, his name is Terrence. He's 17, the same age as you. He made his choice. He chose to assault a man. He chose to continue the cycle. You made a different choice. You chose to intervene. You chose to help. You chose to be a leader." He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city below. "The world isn't about second chances, Ms. Wallace. It's about choices and the consequences that follow. You think the system is broken? You're right, it is. It's slow and it's blind, and it's easily manipulated by men like David Jenkins. But it's all we have." He turned back to her. "You want to change it? You want to really make a difference? An essay won't do it. A scholarship won't do it. You have to get inside. You have to learn the machine." "How?" Imani asked, her voice quiet. "The scholarship covers your tuition." "Fine, but you'll need a summer job. My chambers, my federal clerkship program, it's usually reserved for third-year law students from Harvard and Yale. But I'm making an exception." Imani's jaw dropped. "A clerkship. For a federal judge. For him? That was impossible. It will be the hardest work you have ever done, Pendleton warned. You will read briefs until your eyes bleed. You will fetch my coffee. You will learn why I sentenced Marcus Cole, and you will write me a memo on why I was wrong. And if it's persuasive, I might just listen. Yes, sir. Yes. I accept, Imani said, her voice shaking with a new, powerful emotion. It wasn't just relief. It was purpose. Good. Now go home, Ms. Wallace. Tell your mother, and, he added, a gruff note of concern entering his voice, be careful. Terrence Cole is still out there. The police will find him, but justice, as you'll learn, is slow. Imani walked out of the boardroom, past the smiling receptionist, and into the lobby, where her mother was on her knees, her rosary beads clicking. When Elena saw Imani's face, she burst into tears. Mija! I got it, Mommy, Imani whispered, pulling her mother into a hug. I got it, and I got a job. The elevator ride down felt different. The world outside the glass tower looked sharper, brighter. When they emerged onto the street, Imani took a deep breath of the cool bay air. The long bus ride back to Oakland was quiet. When she got to her block, the sun was starting to set, painting the bruised gray sky in shades of orange and fire. She saw Leo on the corner, dribbling his basketball. He was with two of his friends. He saw her and ran over. Mani, Mom called me. She said you won. That you're going to Berkeley. Is it true? It's true, Leo, she said, pulling him into a hug so tight he grunted. Yo, I heard about Shadow too, he said, his voice dropping. Heard what happened. With the judge. And that other girl, that was crazy, Mani. It was, Imani agreed, letting him go. She looked over his shoulder. Terrence Shadow Cole was not on the corner. The spot where he always stood was empty. The police, she knew, would find him, and he would face Judge Pendleton, and he would face the consequences of his choice. Leo looked at her, his eyes full of an awe she'd never seen before. You weren't even scared, were you? Imani thought about that. She thought about the cold brick, the crack of bone, the blade of Shadow's voice, the ice in Sarah's eyes, and the terrifying absolute power of Judge Pendleton's courtroom. I was terrified, Leo, she said, looking at him. Every single second. But I did it anyway. She smiled, adjusting the strap of her backpack, a backpack that suddenly felt impossibly light. Come on, let's go home. I've got a lot of reading to do. The moral. In a world that quickens its pace for the powerful, we often overlook the quiet, profound courage of the unseen. Imani's story is a testament to the fact that true leadership isn't a title, but a choice, a dangerous, split-second decision to defy the apathy that circumstance demands. Karma, like justice, is not a blind force. It is a meticulously constructed outcome. It finds its mark not by magic, but because individuals, hardened and honed by their own principles, like a judge who remembers, refuse to let a lie stand. It teaches us that while deceit may build an empire, it is the immovable object of truth, wielded by a hand that refuses to tremble, that will ultimately bring it all crashing down.